You know, we always talk about gut health, like it's just about digestion, right?
Right.
But what if I told you that the trillions of tiny little microbes living inside your gut could actually have a huge impact on how well you perform athletically
Oh, absolutely.
and how fast you can recover after those tough workouts?
It's true.
Yeah. So today we're going to do a deep dive into this fascinating world of the gut microbiome
No,
and how it relates to athletic performance and recovery.
sounds good.
Now, your gut microbiome is like this incredibly complex ecosystem
It is.
unique to each and every one of us.
2/3 unique.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
2/3 unique, so it's kind of like our own internal fingerprint in a way.
Yeah, you can think of it that way.
Shaped by a ton of different factors, like what we eat, how much we exercise,
Right.
our age, even our genetics.
Absolutely.
It's a pretty dynamic thing, right?
It is very dynamic.
But this deep dive isn't just about the science.
Yeah.
It's about giving you actionable insights into how you can optimize your own gut health for better performance and recovery.
I like it.
All right, so let's start with nutrition.
Right.
One of the most fascinating things about the gut microbiome is how quickly it can change in response to what we eat.
Yeah. Incredible.
Like within 24 hours,
Yeah.
just from changing our diet, we can start to see shifts in the diversity of our gut bacteria.
You can. And one of the key processes that happens here is carbohydrate fermentation.
Okay, so
So when you eat carbohydrates, some of those carbohydrates make it down to your gut, and the bacteria in your gut ferment them.
what happens during this fermentation process?
So what happens during this fermentation process is those bacteria, they produce these things called short-chain fatty acids.
Or SCFAs for short.
SCFAs for short, you got it.
Now, I know we've talked about these before.
Yeah.
But just to remind everyone, these SCFAs, like butyrate acetate propionate,
Yeah,
they play a really important role in our overall health.
they do.
So can you just break down what each of those does for us?
Sure, so let's start with butyrate. Butyrate is really interesting because it's the preferred energy source for the cells that line your colon.
Oh, wow.
So it's really important for maintaining a healthy gut barrier.
So a healthy gut barrier basically means...
It means that you're preventing things from leaking out of your gut into your bloodstream that shouldn't be there.
Right, so it's like a protective layer.
It's like a protective layer, exactly.
Okay, so that's butyrate. What about acetate and propionate?
Okay, so acetate and propionate, these guys are a little bit different. They actually get absorbed into your bloodstream,
Oh, wow.
and they can contribute to your energy levels
Interesting.
and even influence how your body uses and stores fat.
So that's pretty important for athletes.
That is huge for athletes, yeah.
Right, because that can affect things like
Endurance,
endurance,
energy availability.
recovery,
Mhm.
all of that.
So it's not just about what we're eating, it's about how it's impacting these microbes and what they're producing.
Exactly. You got it.
So what kind of diet is best for promoting these beneficial SCFAs? Well, that's where things get a little bit tricky. There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
But generally speaking, a diet that is rich in complex carbohydrates from fruits, vegetables, and whole grains
Okay.
is going to be really good for promoting the growth of those beneficial bacteria that produce those SCFAs.
Makes sense.
Now, on the flip side, diets that are really high in protein and saturated fat,
Okay.
they might not be the best for your gut barrier.
And why is that?
Well, they can actually increase the production of certain byproducts that can damage that protective layer
And lead to inflammation.
and lead to inflammation, exactly.
So it sounds like balance is key.
Balance is definitely key.
Now, we talk a lot about athletes needing protein,
We do.
but you're saying too much protein might not be a good thing.
Well, it's not necessarily that too much protein is bad.
Okay.
It's more about the type of protein and the overall balance of your diet.
Right.
So, for example, plant-based protein sources like beans, lentils, and tofu,
Okay.
they tend to be lower in saturated fat. And they also provide fiber, which is really important for feeding those good bacteria in your gut.
So it's not about cutting out protein completely.
No, not at all.
It's about choosing the right sources
Exactly.
and making sure you're getting enough fiber.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of fiber, we know that's really important for gut health.
Yeah.
But what does it actually do for those microbes?
So those complex carbohydrates that we find in fiber,
Okay.
they serve as food for those beneficial bacteria in your gut.
So they're eating the fiber,
They're eating the fiber.
and that helps them to grow and thrive
Exactly.
and produce those SCFAs that we were talking about.
Precisely.
So it's like a win-win situation.
It is a win-win.
We eat the fiber, our gut bacteria eat the fiber, and we all benefit.
Exactly.
Okay.
And fiber can also help to mitigate some of those negative effects of a high-protein diet.
Really?
Yeah, it can help to reduce the production of those harmful byproducts that we talked about.
Interesting.
And it can also increase fat oxidation, which is really important for athletes.
So basically, fiber helps to create a more balanced gut environment,
It does.
which can benefit us in multiple ways.
Exactly.
Now, another thing I wanted to touch on is polyphenols,
Okay.
which are found in things like fruits, vegetables,
Yeah,
even things like dates, raisins, bananas.
those are good ones.
And they're really powerful antioxidants.
They are.
But how do they impact our gut?
So polyphenols, they can actually act as prebiotics.
Okay. And what does that mean?
It means that they feed the good bacteria in your gut,
Okay.
and they can also help to reduce inflammation.
Which is especially important for athletes who are constantly putting their bodies under stress.
Absolutely, because when you're training hard, you're creating inflammation.
Right.
And so having those polyphenols in your diet can help to counteract some of that inflammation.
And promote faster recovery.
And promote faster recovery, exactly.
All right, so we've talked a lot about how our diet impacts our gut microbiome. But what about exercise? How does hitting the gym or the track or whatever your preferred form of exercise is, how does that affect our gut?
So this is a relatively new area of research.
yes.
But what we're seeing is that physically active individuals tend to have a more diverse gut microbiome,
So more different types of bacteria?
more different types of bacteria.
And is that a good thing?
It seems to be a good thing
Okay.
because a more diverse gut microbiome is generally associated with better overall health.
Makes sense.
And we also see that physically active individuals have a higher abundance of certain beneficial bacteria.
Okay, so can you give us some examples of those beneficial bacteria?
Sure. So some of the ones that we often see mentioned are Faecalibacterium prausnitzii
Okay.
and Akkermansia mucinifila.
So those are the good guys.
Those are some of the good guys.
Now, I know these names can be a little bit intimidating.
They can.
But basically what we're saying is that exercise seems to promote the growth of these beneficial bacteria,
Right.
which can then have a positive impact on our overall health.
Absolutely.
And we also see that physically active individuals have higher concentrations of those SCFAs that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, which is really interesting because it suggests that exercise and diet can work together
Synergistically.
synergistically, to promote a healthier gut microbiome.
I like it.
And it's not just about the type of exercise you do. It's also about the intensity and duration.
Okay, so how does that play into it?
Well, studies have shown that you need to exercise for at least 8 weeks
Okay.
to really see those positive changes in your gut microbiome.
So consistency is key.
Consistency is key.
And what about the intensity?
The intensity is important too.
Okay.
So, for example, high-intensity interval training, or HIIT,
Yeah.
has been shown to have a more pronounced effect on the gut microbiome.
Didn't say just going for a light jog.
Right, exactly.
Interesting. So it seems like pushing ourselves a little bit can actually have a positive impact on our gut
It can.
and, in turn, our overall health. Now, one thing that I find really fascinating is the connection between the gut microbiome and immunity,
Yeah.
because we don't often think of those two things as being related.
Right.
But it turns out that our gut bacteria play a really important role in helping our immune system to function properly.
They do. They play a huge role.
So how does that work?
Well, your gut is actually home to about 70% of your immune cells.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So it's like a major hub for immune activity.
It is.
And your gut bacteria are constantly interacting with those immune cells,
Right.
helping to train them and keep them in check.
Exactly. And a healthy gut microbiome can actually reduce your risk of developing inflammatory conditions.
Okay, so things like...
Things like allergies,
Mhm.
asthma, autoimmune diseases.
So it's not just about digestion, it's about protecting us from disease.
It's a much bigger picture.
Now, we know that exercise can have a positive impact on the immune system,
Right.
but how does that tie into the gut microbiome?
So when you exercise, your body releases certain hormones and chemicals.
Mhm.
That can actually stimulate the growth of beneficial bacteria in your gut.
Interesting.
And those beneficial bacteria can then help to boost your immune function.
So it's like this positive feedback loop.
It is.
Exercise helps the gut bacteria help the immune system.
Exactly.
Now, on the flip side, we also know that intense prolonged exercise
Right.
can actually temporarily suppress the immune system.
It can.
And this has been linked to changes in the gut microbiome.
Right. So when you're exercising really hard for a long period of time, you're actually creating some stress on your body.
Right.
And that stress can lead to changes in the composition of your gut bacteria.
And those changes can then make you more susceptible to infection.
Potentially.
Oh,
Exactly.
that's like a delicate balance.
It is.
We need to find that sweet spot where we're pushing ourselves enough to get the benefits of exercise.
Right. But not so much that we're compromising our immune system.
No, I want to talk about elite athletes.
Okay.
Because we always hear about how they have these incredible gut microbiomes.
Yeah, they tend to.
Is there any truth to that?
There is some truth to that.
Okay, so what's going on there?
So studies have shown that elite athletes tend to have a more diverse gut microbiome.
Okay, so we've heard that before.
Right. We've heard that before.
Diversity seems to be a good thing.
Diversity is a good thing.
And they also tend to have a higher abundance of those beneficial bacteria that we've been talking about.
Right.
And they also tend to have higher concentrations of SCFAs.
Yes.
So it seems like their gut microbiomes are just firing on all cylinders.
They're really optimized for performance.
Now, is this just because of their genetics?
It's not just genetics.
Okay.
It's also their lifestyle.
So their diet and their training,
Their diet, their training, their sleep, everything,
all of it contributes
all of it contributes.
to creating this optimal gut environment.
Exactly.
Now, are there any specific bacteria that have been linked to athletic performance?
There are a few.
Okay, so tell us about them.
So one of the most interesting ones is called Veillonella.
Okay, Veillonella.
Veillonella. And what does it do?
So Veillonella is really good at metabolizing lactate.
Okay, and lactate is...
Lactate is a byproduct of exercise
Right.
that can build up in your muscles and cause fatigue.
So this bacteria is helping to clear out that lactate,
It is.
which could potentially improve endurance.
It could.
Interesting.
And studies have actually shown that supplementing with Veillonella can improve running performance.
Wow, so that's pretty cool.
It's really cool.
So we might actually be able to manipulate our gut microbiome to improve our athletic performance.
Potentially, yeah.
Now, another bacteria that we often see mentioned in the context of athletic performance is Prevotella. Prevotella.
Yeah,
And this one is a little bit more controversial
it is.
because it's been linked to both positive and negative health outcomes.
Right. So it's found in higher abundance in endurance athletes.
Okay.
And it's also found in higher abundance in certain populations that are known for their longevity.
Interesting.
But it's also been linked to inflammatory conditions.
So it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag.
And we still need more research to fully understand its role in health and performance.
Exactly.
So it's not as simple as just saying this bacteria is good or bad.
Right. It's much more nuanced than that.
It depends on the context.
It does.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into the gut microbiome and athletic performance,
Okay.
what are some of the key takeaways that you want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway is that your gut microbiome is a dynamic ecosystem
Okay.
that is constantly being shaped by your lifestyle choices.
So what we eat, how we exercise,
What you eat, how you exercise, your sleep, your stress levels, all of that.
all of it matters.
All of it matters.
And by making small, consistent changes to our lifestyle,
Right.
we can actually promote a healthier gut microbiome,
You can.
which can then lead to better athletic performance
And better overall health.
and better overall health.
It's really powerful.
It is really powerful.
I think the other big takeaway is that we're just scratching the surface of what we know about the gut microbiome.
Right? There's still so much more research to be done.
There is.
But what we do know is that it's a really important factor in our overall health.
It is.
And it's definitely worth paying attention to.
Absolutely.
So if you're an athlete, or even if you're just someone who wants to improve their health,
Yeah.
start thinking about how you can nourish your gut microbiome,
I love that.
because it really is the foundation for everything else.
It is.
So as you go about your day today,
Okay.
think about this.
Okay.
What's one small change that you can make to either your diet or your exercise routine that could potentially make a big difference in your gut health and ultimately your performance?
Yeah, that's a great question to think about.
And I think that's a great place to leave it for today.
I agree.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the gut microbiome.
It was my pleasure.
We'll see you next time.
All right.